Okay, well, the title of my presentation is Building and Evaluating Participation Online. I'm going to review teaching with the Participation Forum and using a graphical tool called the Participation Map, both designed to work on Moodle 2. As you can see, my name is Brant Knutzen. I'm the Learning Designer for the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. And I also do seminars for the Center for Information Technology and Education. I teach about 30% of my time on the master's course, IT and Education, and the other 70% of my time is spent in professional development of staff, developing seminars, supporting them when they want to incorporate technology in their teaching. So I'd like to use a pointer. A little red dot would be good, but I'll have to just struggle through. So the overview, I'm going to touch on social constructivism and a term called transactivity. Look at how we can build engagement with the students, various types of assessment, look at ways we can rate participation, and finally ways to measure and display engagement by the students. So this is a relatively old term, CMC, computer-mediated conferencing, divided into two areas, synchronous, chat or instant messaging, and asynchronous, as in discussion forums. So in an asynchronous interchange, participants take turns posting. It could be minutes, hours, or days apart. The advantage is this gives more time for the students to digest, research, and compose their response, particularly in Hong Kong or any place where English may not be their first language. It gives them time to compose and decide exactly what they want to say. So here's the learning interactions we're going to be talking about using CMC. The tutor at the top can facilitate and assign things, do tasks for the students. The students can do research on the internet or with the teacher-supplied content, but the purpose for this is going to be, this presentation is to focus on the collaboration between the students. So social constructivism has to do with the effective construction of knowledge as a product of a functional collaborative group, and the idea is that they're producing artifacts for public display and use. So how do we get that effectiveness? It's been found to be linked to the process that the learners utilize in working on the task, and the process comes down to a social negotiation of arguments and argument sequences. So a bit of a lit review there, based on the ideas of the pedagogy of social constructivism and how it applies. John Biggs, my personal hero, captured the educational value of discussion when he stated good dialogue elicits those activities that shape, elaborate, and deepen understanding. So when Biggs talked about dialogue, I interpret that as more of a conversational dialogue, not stand up and give a lecture of 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs. I'm looking for a conversational interchange between the students, and I feel that that natural interaction is more likely to result in more productive interaction and hopefully transaction or transactivity between the students. So transactivity, the term talks about it's the method by which students build on the contributions of their fellow learners. The term's been around a long time. It's still fairly not common, not seen very often. But for me, it's a key idea going beyond just interaction, but actually building on each other. So hopefully they'll scaffold each other up in their understanding to a higher mastery of the content or concepts. Transactive online discussions where participants respond to and build on each other has to do with the pure exchange of information ideas and social negotiation of knowledge. So they're kind of they have some dissonance as each other struggles with their own interpretation or perceptions. Particularly at the master's level, you can bring in a lot of different experiences because most of my students, for example, are working and they have a lot of different work experiences and past things that from their own education. Also, they come from various cultures, the mainland, Hong Kong, Western cultures. So this is an area where I agree, a remix where everybody kind of fills in what they're thinking about, particularly in the early stages of the discussion. You get a lot of perspective exchange between the students. So this is a key theoretical construct for measuring collaboration. And some of the questions that I wanted to address was how can we formulate the instructional design conditions which consistently result in more productive and transactive learning activities. And then once we've got that production and that transactivity, how can we describe it in easily grasped ways, such as quantitatively or qualitatively? So the potential of an online discussion, for me, it's a great formative learning activity for building depth of student understanding or supporting project work. Kind of like we give them the infrastructure from that, and they use that tool and that communication channel to build up their understanding. I feel it has the highest potential for social construction of knowledge and transactive collaboration. But in my experience, the online discussion activity using an LMS such as Moodle is also the most likely to fail. So I thought I'd throw that out there to the audience. And why do you think that online discussions, in your experience, or what have you seen with the online discussion, what makes it break? What makes it fail in your experience? You can type in chat, or you can take the mic. Up to you. Lack of facilitation. Definitely. Thank you, Matthew. Poor or understanding of the process by the teacher. Fail as in not achieve its goals. It doesn't have any, it doesn't achieve the production. Sure, student fear of failure, it's public, right? They don't want to look silly. Lack of direction and instructions. Often the teacher doesn't really understand the process, and so they don't get it started in a way that will be productive. The actual mechanisms, the way that the teacher sets it up is key to its success. Let's see, can I break out this chat window? No, like a bigger chat window. Lack of emotional investment at the onset. Good, Russell, I agree with you there. You'll see that my methodology, it's key that you get the students engaged and invested at the very onset. Remoteness, lack of esprit among the participants. Certainly, if they don't feel a sense of an active learning community, then it won't go anywhere. And one way you can build that is to have a face-to-face component. If it's purely distance, I try to facilitate that using something like Illuminate, which is now Blackboard Collaborate, or Adobe Connect, or even touch panel option, top right, pull down. I'll deal with that later. Pull it up to make the chat window bigger. There we go. Okay, so I can't see the people, but that gives me a little bigger window. Great, thanks. Adobe Connect I can use to get some face-to-face time, perhaps an online 1 hour a week, just for students to see each other if they don't meet in an actual classroom. And if you can't afford those tools, I found Ustream, a free tool of Ustream, to be useful. Let's see if I can I believe it's a COM. That's a free tool. You can just broadcast. The teacher can broadcast, and then I use a Moodle chat to get the interaction back from the students. All right. There we go. .tv. Thank you, Russell. So let's move on. So in 2007, I did my first study on trying to build engagement using an online discussion. I was teaching in an international school here in Hong Kong. I'd been teaching in a one-to-one laptop environment because I was the IT teacher. But my undergraduate, I double majored in psychology and computer science. I always wanted to teach psychology, so this school gave me an opportunity to teach both the Introduction to Psychology and the AP Psychology course. And my sample size was 24. I wanted to find out how can I get a highly productive online discussion going. At the start of my study, the average student production in an optional online discussion was 1 post per student. And that, I thought, I was pretty sad. I thought that was pretty lame. And in actuality, at the university level, often in an optional discussion, only 10 or 20% of the students will participate. So if it's optional, especially in Asia, where they're very instrumental learners, they won't waste their time on things that don't earn points. They may watch, they may lurk, but they probably won't participate. So I wanted to explore ways to get the students actually engaged and being productive. So I tried a lot of different things, and I found these 4 conditions were essential to achieve productive online discussions. The teacher had to facilitate the social formation of small groups. 3 people is a minimum, a bit sparse. If somebody is a slacker, then 2 people won't carry very well. So 4 is good, 5 works, 6 I found is a little bit tends to be a little too big, and you get a few people just slacking off and just riding the efforts of others. So But it is essential that the teacher facilitates that formation. You cannot have 20 or 30 voices all competing for time. And also, when I ask the students to ask someone a question, if there are only 3 or 4 or 5 people in the group, then they know who they're supposed to ask questions of. But if there's 20 or 30 people in the group, it's very difficult for students to begin that question process. The second point here is class time to initiate oral and online discussions. If they're face-to-face, give them 5 minutes to exchange their views orally, and then take it online. Hopefully get started right here in the classroom if you have the laptops. If you don't have a one-to-one laptop environment, then I suggest that the teacher says, okay, write down this paragraph or so, and as soon as you get home or to a computer, do the discussion immediately tonight. So you need to get started right away. Most of my discussions are in a 2-week window, and if you don't push the students to get started immediately, then the students will wait until the last day and try to cram all the activity in there. So, yeah, I agree. A strong message about how important something is. This is something I want you to do now. So the first 1 and 2, are just pretty much just classroom control, classroom discipline, but I found it to be essential. Number 3 here, setting open-ended, challenging topic questions that encourage discussion and debate. I did my first moderation of a debate board on a BBS in 1983, and I noticed at that time that some discussions took off, and a lot of people got involved, very enthusiastic, a lot of investment. Other discussions didn't go anywhere, so I started thinking about the types of topic questions and the way that they're phrased, and I'll address that more in this presentation further. This is kind of the artistic side of this challenge. The fourth one, the assessment system that reinforces production and peer interaction. Notice that term reinforcement. It's kind of a behaviorist idea, but I found it was key that the way the points were awarded did recognize quantity and tried to stimulate peer interaction. At the end of my study, the average student production was over 10 posts per discussion. So I felt that I was onto something here and that I had achieved my goal. Over the last 6 years, I've used this online discussion methodology or design extensively, both with secondary students in a one-to-one laptop environment, IT classes, teaching psychology. I implemented it at the University of Hong Kong in 2009 in my master's courses on e-learning. Then I got 10 instructors with 12 courses at Lingnan University, also here in Hong Kong, to try the methodology in 2010 in courses such as business, history, social studies, philosophy, and English. And the design continued to result in good production. Some teachers, their outcomes were awesome. The chair of the English department at Lingnan has continued to use this methodology and gets stellar results. But anytime you introduce a methodology to a group of people, you're going to get a normal curve of distribution. And for example, the history teacher and the business teachers did quite well. The philosophy professors ran into more problems as to mostly their way that they moderated the discussions. But overall, it was definitely an effective thing to introduce. So Jillian's done this in Linda, voluntary classes. Social constructivist approach, fabulous, even when no reward by assessment. I agree social constructivism is a key component of the methodology and the motivation of students, and it works particularly well with Western students where there seems to be more intrinsic motivation. In Asian, it tends to be more extrinsic recognition of reward, and then there you get into social obligation to support your group. So again, there's another factor beyond just points. I have put out a couple of papers, Jillian, but I will do this one at Lingnan here pretty soon. I expect to deliver a paper on that this summer, both at Chinese University and also at the Moodle Root coming up in July. So let's touch on how the discussion topic questions can be best designed. And I found 1 to 3 questions around a single topic area. You don't want to try to cover 2 or 3 topic areas. It needs to have a focus. The advantage I found of multiple questions, you can design a gradient of difficulty to elicit a range of student answers. For example, you can start out with questions trying to evoke a basic knowledge response and move up to higher order thinking skills. Yes, I'm afraid so. Blackboard. Is that who actually going to name it? I hope not. Little takeover there. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, a grading of difficulty, moving up to higher order thinking skills. I found if you use a taxonomy of active verbs to specify the levels of understanding, such as Bloom's Revised or Solo. Who is familiar with Solo taxonomy? This was also produced by John Biggs, The Structure of Observed Learning Outcomes. I found it to be very useful. Great. Russell, Jillian? Good. So, for example, the first question might ask the students to list, describe, or classify. The second question might ask them at a relational level, compare, contrast, explain, analyze, relate. And the final question tries to evoke or elicit an extended abstract response, hypothesize, generate, or reflect. Now, the objective of these multiple questions is to make the discussion accessible to all students. The history professor at Lingnan found that he was the only question he put up was so challenging that only the A students would attempt it. So I worked with him to try to get to a gradient where the initial question was quite easily accessible to all students, just list or describe. But at the same time, you want to move up to the higher questions, which challenge the advanced students. Yes, Moodle Rules, a huge one in the U.S. and NetSpot. These are the two largest open source service providers in the world. So they only bought two, but they bought big. We'll see how that goes. Kind of a whole different topic there, but may play a role certainly in the open source world. The other one, the topic question gradients, I found to be useful. Moving from concrete facts to abstract concepts, or moving from the textbook context to the personal context. And advantage those, you get unique answers. So I often ask my students, what's your experience? Can you give me an example from your experience? And as soon as they get into this area of the personal context, you no longer have to worry about plagiarism, of copying each other's work or bringing in something from the outside. It just doesn't happen. So when teachers have problems with plagiarism, I don't usually blame the students. I try to encourage the instructor to teach in a different way. Yes, everybody answers the easy questions anyways. I agree that people jump right onto it, and the first question is just a quick dash, and often students have pretty similar answers. But the idea is to get everybody involved, everybody on the board. And then once you get into the second question or third question, or you go sort of a holistic, or let's go do an overview of this topic, then you get the A students leading the way, and the B and C students watching and perhaps interacting a bit timidly at first and getting involved later. And because I don't do subjective grading, it's a risk-free environment, which I'll touch on next. So here's an example of a topic question gradient, asking students about what they've learned in this studying the Porter management models. Can you list and describe? So basic. Can you compare the models? Can you relate the models to each other? Relational. And finally, based on these models, can you create your own model? What factors do you think are important? So asking them to theorize at the extended abstract level. So this is just an example from one of the business courses that tried this methodology at Lingnan. Thanks, Jillian. So traditional, let's talk about discussion marking schemes. For example, teacher-assessed subjective marking. You can look at participation. Did they contribute? Are they interacting with each other? Are they transactive? Are they really sharing and exchanging useful information, which they can use to build their own response? And transformation. Does their perspective change due to interaction with others? Now, this is the best method for summative assessment, right? Teacher-subjective marking. But my question to you, should a discussion be a summative activity to measure final performance at the end of a term? What do you think? Anybody want the microphone? Raise your hand if you have a comment. Should a discussion be a summative activity? No, Julian says not. It's a reflective activity. It's a process, I agree. It can be assessed later, but you want to see the process developing over time. Could we cycle in some parts of discussion to summative? Good, I agree. And I agree that the formative activities in the discussion should feed into the final summative final assignments, for example. And also with Jillian, the reflective component, you'll see that I definitely emphasize reflective thinking. Language context, depends on the level of activity, for example, synthesis. Latrobe leading the way in Moodle adoption. A tool to form ideas and nut out, that's a good Australian term, nut out some answers together without the pressure of an assessment task. And I agree, I want to avoid the pressure of subjective assessment. I want the students to feel free. If it isn't, will they do it? And that is really the whole purpose of my presentation, Liz, is trying to develop a methodology which ensures they will do it, and then it's up to the teacher to build the quality into the learning activity. New Zealand, sorry, Sean. From the American perspective, they're all down there together. But I recognize that you guys see a huge difference between a Kiwi and an Aussie. Sorry. In the term party. Great. Can't tell the accent from the typing, exactly. I just knew that it wasn't an American thing. They were going to nut out their understanding. All right, let's move on. So here, if you do want to use a rubric for assessment, I want to give some examples here. This is a source from ISTE-NET, the National Educational Technology Standards for Students. So, for example, locate, organize, analyze, evaluate, synthesize, etc. information from a variety of sources, interacting, collaborating with peers or experts, using a variety of environments or media, developing better cultural understanding, global awareness, engaging with learners from other cultures, which is great when you can bring in people from multiple cultures, and last, contributing to project teams to produce original works or solve problems. I think these are great rubrics, and I mean great criteria in a rubric. I'm not sure if I agree with the subjective assessment of forms in general, but if you have to go that direction, I think these would be a good place to start. Problems with teacher assessment. A highly productive discussion can easily produce over 200 posts a week. Every week, I run 2 discussions in my courses, sometimes 3. Every discussion produces over 200 posts on average. So if that happens, the teacher can become a victim of their own success. If they're trying to do quantitative marking using a complex rubric, how much time will that take? And how much time remains for qualitative feedback from the teacher? I agree we need standards, and training the students up front, a rubric would be useful. Perhaps the initial discussion could use a rubric and then move on from there once the students get the idea. You can also put up examples. I usually guide quality by giving feedback to students and pointing out what I think is good quality, putting it on the projector when we get back to class next time face-to-face and saying, this is great work because of this, this, and this, or posting the same idea online. Peer assessment. We want our graduates to have critical thinking skills. We want them to have cooperative skills, integrity, personal responsibility, and subjective peer assessment can directly address the development of these attributes. It does require student training, and it does require review and evaluation by the teacher. Possible problems, revenge grading. You give me a low grade, I will give you a low grade. Back scratching. If you give me a high grade, I will give you a high grade. So these are issues that have to be dealt with more commonly at the lower age levels. I teach down to around 15 years old when I was at the international school. And it does happen. I did see some issues with this. It doesn't typically happen at the master's level, though. So this is pretty much where I'm going with my solution, is to leverage the power of the LMS. Automate the rating based on participation. No subjective judgment, just rating using a systematic method. So post number 1 always gets a rating of 6. Now this is typically the notes or a summary of your original perspective on an issue. The second post automatically gets a rating of 10, and this is where you ask the students to do a round of questions in their groups of 3, 4, 5, or 6 students. Ask somebody a question. That automatically gets a rating of 10. Round 3, answers. Answer the questions that have been posted to you. That automatically gets a 10. And finally, a reflective round at the end. Usually at the end of about 2 weeks, on the 10th or 11th day, I'll send out a reminder asking students it's time to reflect. And I teach how to do reflection. We look at Mesurow's articles. We look at transformation or reviewing how you got to this new understanding, that kind of thing. And I think reflecting on at the end of the discussion to wrap it up is essential. Zeta 2, yes, the students see the ratings. In my initial implementations over the last 6 years, I teach the students how to award these ratings. So everybody puts up their first post, and I say, okay, inside your groups, rate the other students using the pull-downs on the Moodle forums. And I have to override the student roles to enable that. It used to be easy back in 2007, and then the later version of Moodle made it much more difficult. And you had the administrator had to override the student role permissions. And now in Moodle 2, even a teacher level can override the student role, but that is fairly technical, and this can be a barrier for teachers to adopt this. They assign the ratings, they can see the ratings, and they can see who gave them the ratings. So it's essential that everybody knows what's happening. And again, I put it up on the projector on the initial discussions to make sure everybody understands what's expected. Because it is an objective system, there's no issues about who gave me a 6 or a 7 or I'm going to give them a 5. It's just every post follows this system. The first post gets a 6, every post after that gets a 10. I realize this is a bit revolutionary. It's kind of a whole different shift to assessment, but bear with me and I'll try to explain it. Not allowed in our Moodle config. Well, I have a new kind of forum Rick which automates this. So if you installed my new forum, then it would take care of both overriding the student role. Yes, quality of posting is not addressed here, Bill, but I'll get to that soon enough. So somebody did enable student ratings, and it does work. And I'm going to release my new forum soon. It's just coming out of testing and initial production here. I'll release it at Moodle Moot. So let's move on to the next page. So Moodle averages the ratings. The first post, you have a D- on an American 10-point scale to 60%. 2 posts are averaged, right? A 6 and a 10 average to an 8. That's a B-. 3 posts, you have an 8.6. 4 posts, you have a 9, etc. So I specified 4 types of posts. Where does these beyond 4 posts come from? That's more Q&A participation, earning a higher grade. So you want to reinforce this idea of students going back and forth with Q&A. Here's a little graph that shows how the grade is calculated. As you move up from 0 posts to the first post, you get a 6, and then it goes up to an 8, 8.6. 4 posts, you're at a 9. Most students now realize they're kind of in control of this grade, and they can just drive it up. Now, maintaining quality, you don't want students to just post quick little one-liners to each other, so we'll talk about how we maintain quality. So this assessment for assessing a forum produces a foundation of participation. On average, over 90% of the students will engage with the topic. As always, the teacher's role is to create the educational value of the activity. It's up to us to set up challenging topic questions to guide exploration. It's up to us to maintain a visible presence in the forum activity, so we're there. When people have questions about online discussions, I tend to draw back to the analogy of an oral discussion. If the teacher assigns the students, particularly young students, to have an oral discussion and gives them control of an automated system that every time they raise their hand, their grade will go up, and then the teacher leaves the room for half an hour, what's the quality of the discussion? Very low. But if the teacher is there in the room, guiding, rewarding good quality participation, recognizing good contributions, this is the teacher's role to maintain the visible presence. Yes, I agree, Russell. The incentive is for the least engaged student, and that gets those people on board. So I'll touch on that very soon. And the last point I have here is up to the teacher to successfully moderate the discussion. Now, I'm going to bring up Salmon's 5-stage model of e-moderation. Anybody familiar with Salmon's before? The idea is, great. What size group is optimal per staff member? This can scale up. I typically teach in 20 or 30 students at a time, but if you have TAs to help out, especially graduate students who have taken your course before, you can scale up well to 100 or 200. You just have to get everybody in small groups of, say, 4 or 5. So Salmon's five-stage moderation, you have to teach the students how to actually access the course and the initial motivation of how the point system is going to work, and get them socializing so they know how to send and receive, recognizing their group mates, get them exchanging information, hopefully move up to the level of knowledge construction, and then at the highest level where their students are actually developing knowledge, supporting each other, scaffolding each other. Often it's up to the teachers to get out of the way, step back. This is not a time for the teacher to be intrusive. So the teacher does guide the students up the levels, and moderation skills are a key. I wanted to mention, she was at USQ. I've met her. I think I was at a conference in Malaysia where I met her. Jilly Salmon. This is an area where I've seen a professor fall down in moderation skills. He put up good questions, and then every time a student would post, he would immediately reply to that student and tell him point by point why he was wrong. And then he'd wait for another student to post to their first post somewhere else, and immediately jump on that student publicly, show them why point by point they were wrong. And he wondered why his discussions were failing. So it was a bit of a painful explanation for him, I think, but I did get him to understand and change his moderation technique. But moderation skills are important both face-to-face and online. So just kind of reviewing here, the idea of a participation-based forum grade. The Moodle LMS handles the awarding of the quantitative marks for participation. This gives the teacher time to focus on quality, monitoring the progress, guiding the discussion, challenging the students, gives the teacher time for thoughtful qualitative feedback. So this is really my goal, is to eliminate all the tiny little quantitative marks that motivate students. Instead, the teacher time, which I estimated the minimum of 30 minutes to an hour each week for each discussion. Now that could easily go up to 1 or 2 hours depending on how involved you get, same for the students. I expect the students to spend 1 to 2 hours per week on homework in discussions. It's pretty easy homework. I'm not asking them to write an essay, just converse with their group mates. Thanks, Jillian. I agree, it's part of the craft of teaching, moderation. So how do we motivate students? Now, I found the motivation to work well on 3 levels: constructive alignment between formative discussions and summative final assignments. For example, every discussion ends up with reflective component, reflective posts. And I explained this early on, that the students have a final assignment of a learning portfolio, and that's going to be 10 or 20% of their final grade. And around the second or third week, I start to say, okay, collect your reflective posts, copy them into this forum over here, and we're going to start practicing building our learning portfolio. So the students see what each reflective post from each discussion is going to be copied into a blog, and then they're going to kind of metacognitive, think about their thinking, and to re-reflect and build a final reflection to build a learning portfolio blog. So that's one example where the formative discussions are directly aligned with summative final assignments. Keep your contributions to less than 20% of the total. Yeah, that's fine. I agree. The moderator, the teacher, may have an active presence in the early day or two, especially if the students take off in the wrong direction. If they misunderstand the topic question, then the teacher needs to jump in and say, no, I meant this, or that term means this. And there, the teacher needs to moderate very quickly and effectively. But as the discussion builds, I agree with you, it was Russell, I think, step back. David, step back and let the students do their discussions. If they don't need help, don't jump in. Occasionally I'll step in and challenge somebody to kind of move beyond, or suggest, if you're talking about this, have you looked at this link? Have you considered this resource? That kind of thing. That's another perspective. Another example of formative and summative work aligned is group collaboration on a final project development. So, for example, a final project might be 50%, 60% of the total grade. And if these discussions are directly aligned with this discussion is to help you with step 1 of building your project. This next discussion is to help you with step 2 of building your project. And if the students know that the work they do is essential to getting that 50% grade on the project, then they'll be more motivated to work in the discussions. 40% of the post, but not 40% of the information. That's good. That's an interesting idea, where small posts, small guiding posts, while the students are contributing most of the information. I agree. The idea here is to let the students have a place to build their own knowledge. The second motivation is social constructivism, a sense of social obligation to support the group. Now, the first one, constructive alignment, tends to work very well with Western students, intrinsically motivated students. The second level here, social constructivism, is actually, I found, to be more effective in Asia, where there's a stronger sense of social obligation to support the group, to help advance the progress of the group. And the third level is kind of the one that we just went through, the quantified participation. Each contribution is counted as participation towards a form grade. Now, the A students are probably most affected by number one here, constructive alignment. The B students, perhaps more affected by social constructivism. The C and D students, the passive learners who normally just pretend to be paying attention or not, sitting in the back of the room, that's where the quantified participation forces them to be active, forces them to get involved. And that can, you'll get a little backlash, right? They're not happy about being dragged off their passive role and being forced to be active every week. So you will get some feedback that they don't want to interact. But I found it to be very effective. So you require participation, and then you craft it so that you get good quality. And that's, obviously the teacher is essential to this process. It's not just the LMS driving the discussion, by no means. So the participation form automates the awarding of participation points. It reduces the technical requirements. For example, modifying the student role, that's no longer necessary, because the participation form automatically does the points in the background. There's no need to train the students to award the points, no need to monitor the rating accuracy, no need to motivate the student rating posts, reminding group 3 you haven't rated each other. So that's all done automatically. I finished development and testing in December 2011. It's currently in trials at HKU. It's doing very well in its initial steps. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes by the end of the term. And then I plan on announcing it and releasing it as an open source project in July. Yeah, the ethos of the classroom, the importance of activity, and how I expect everybody to be involved. It's kind of a secondary school attitude. It works very well with undergraduates. Master's students are often don't really, they don't need that extrinsic motivation as much, but I think everybody's happy to get points. I mean, if you can turn over 20% of the grade to the students and say it's just participation, all you have to do is contribute to the classroom and you'll get 20% of your grade. I think most students, even graduate students, are happy to have that sense of control. So it's a quantitative mark of how do we measure discussion activity. So big shift in the discussion here. We can look at it quantitatively by production, total number of discussion posts divided by the number of students. Interactivity, the total number of feedback posts, again, divided by the number of students. So we're looking at replies. You can look at group activity, how many discussion posts divided by the number of discussion topics. And I kind of created this way to measure transactivity as defining it as production times interactivity. You can also try to measure discussion activity qualitatively. So I created a new graphical representation. I'm calling it now the participation map. It was originally developed as the Bush Grapher at Lehman University using a TG grant, Teaching Development Grant. And they posted it as open source, so I'm going to continue development as an open source project, calling it the participation map. I was the principal investigator on the TDG, and originally I taught TAs how to create these by hand, but I've developed a new Moodle plugin, and JP, you're welcome. So this new Moodle plugin automates the production of this map. It used to take a TA 5 hours to read all the posts and painstakingly create, using this inspiration software, create a graph. If you have the money to pay a TA 5 hours for each graph, that's great, but I don't think most teachers do. So I developed this plugin. It generates quantitative statistics and also a qualitative graphic display, what I'm calling a data portrait. I looked at the flower garden and people garden. I forget now. There's a couple of other ones out there that kind of gave me ideas. but I'll show you an example here. I find it useful for displaying discussion activity. Initially, I developed so I could give feedback to students in my class and also to show the teacher of the prior course the difference, and then I've created an anonymous mode for reporting research results. Do I allow interaction outside Moodle? Certainly, if they want to do blogging or whatever works for them, Facebook, I've seen that used to help coordinate activities. But I tend to try to keep as many points being accumulated inside Moodle because I use the gradebook. If I have 20 discussions in my course, it's nice if all the points automatically flow into the gradebook. The students can see the grade developing, and they find that pretty motivating. And just eliminates transcription of grades from activities outside of Moodle. So just the advantage of keeping it in-house. Okay, so here is my example participation map. Now all the animations which I carefully put in have popped up in one, but I'll try to review it here. Along the bottom, you see where it says Student Profile Pictures. Now, in this anonymous example, every picture, it's normally from the Moodle profile picture, has been replaced with a little happy face with sunglasses on. So each student picture shows up in their group. Now, in my methodology, students are free to post in other group areas, so you can see where students, thank you with the pointer there, can interact in multiple groups. So you'll see some groups, in this particular example, the group size is 3, but because students are free to go interact with other groups which may be more active, you'll see that the columns will appear with their names again. Each student is assigned a unique color, and inside the little box, that indicates a post by the student, and you can set it to show their first name, their last names, their Moodle usernames, whichever. On the left side is the time scale, from bottom, day 1, moving up. This is by choice, Lorraine. I used to do it socially by students that sat together, let them get into groups. Now I put up the topic, like the research papers that we're going to do as part of my master's course, and let the students group based on a common interest in a given research topic. So the time scale starts with day 1 at the bottom, and as it goes up, day 2, day 3, up to day 14. I find I assign discussions every week. But then if students are sick or absent or just need to catch up, I give them an overall 2-week period, and that gives them sort of a cushion to try to catch up. But I encourage them to stay up, keep up with the weekly discussion. So you can see where students are posting, and then a little arrow links one post to another if that's a reply. So you're looking for patterns where the students post back and forth. Near the middle of this chart, you'll see 2 purple columns where the students are kind of in a conversation with 2 students getting involved there and replying back and forth to each other, day 10, day 11, day 12, day 13, day 14. So I found this bush grapher, which is now I'm going to call the participation map, to be very useful for looking at the overall discussion. And you can see the activities of discussion. You can see where groups over here on the far right side are just not logging on and posting often enough to point out on the right side the red posts and the far yellow on the right side of this example. And this shows where students are not logging on often enough, they're not interacting. That's it, right there, the red, exactly. That's procrastination. He's pointing to an area right now where the group, that group on the far right, is trying to get their grade up in the last day or 2. And when I put this up on a projector and say, group, whatever your name is there, this is why your grade's not very high, because you're not participating on a regular basis, and it's just difficult to get an asynchronous discussion interactive in the last day. So it's very useful for student feedback. It's very useful for teachers recognizing I need to remind them at day 7 to be interacting or getting their reflective posts up. Yes, it's strictly about who interacts with who. At this level, I cannot see the content of the post. That's where you're actually looking into the post. So with your presence, you're in the post reading. I use read tracking in Moodle, so I can see which discussions are active and which discussions I need to keep up with. And when people say, they post, I wonder what we're supposed to do here, if you can reply within a day or so, then they know that you're watching and that you care. And so that shows the students that you're involved and you're ready to support. The red line at the top shows the rating cutoff period. So any posts after that red line they cannot be rated. So they won't contribute to the grade. So it's kind of that discussion is closing. And you see the little blue post, very small blue post. The instructor in this example is providing final feedback to each group. So you can see those little blue areas, thank you, where the teacher is giving feedback to cap the discussion. At the bottom, you see where it says group comparison stats. There's a little yellow rectangle around it. Each group is giving feedback as to the number of participants, the average number of posts per participant in this group, the interaction, how many interactive posts, and a transactivity score. And finally, in the top left, you see the yellow rectangle there for overall discussion statistics. That gives the overall quantitative statistics to describe this entire 2-week discussion. So if we go to the next slide, I'll do a blow up on that top left. Yeah, every week. I can not only it's good for me, but also it's good to show the students and give them feedback. And in anonymous mode, this can be used at a conference to say, this is the way the discussions look if I use a rubric, and this is the way the discussions look if I use the participation forum methodology. Is this PMAP available during the course? Definitely. A teacher can generate this every day. You just push a button and it creates it. The developer, a computer science graduate student that helped me develop the code for this, said that he thinks he could create an animated version where you could watch it grow in real time using Ajax, right, for those techies out there. And you could actually watch the little icons appear as students were posting in real time. Obviously, it would grow pretty slowly. Musical language context and negotiated meaning is important. Greater number of interaction. Definitely. I want a high degree of interaction. I want, on average, 10 posts per student per discussion, weekly discussion. So let's zoom in on the quantitative stats there on the top left. So this is what it prints in the top left. Me and Thomas Lexstraight was the graduate student who helped me with the code. Gives the course title, the forum title. It shows the rating restriction dates from whatever date to whatever date. In this example, there were 27 participants. The average number of posts per student, or what I term production, was 7.7. Average number of feedback posts, that means it's only counting those posts that are replies. So if you reply to yourself, it doesn't count as interactivity. And that number is 6.6. So you want that number to be close to the 7.7. Average number of posts per discussion topic, so how grouped are they? And finally, transactivity score, production times interactivity. I just kind of randomly made that up, deciding that this is how I measure transactivity. And because it's a multiplication, it's quite sensitive. At 50.8, if the student's average number of posts change slightly, or the interactivity changes slightly, that number will react very strongly. So it's useful to compare one discussion to another. That 50.8 may jump up to 70 very quickly with small differences in production. So it's just a way to get a more sensitive readout. So after this participation map is installed on your server, this plugin is available only to those with teacher roles. It creates a new option on the course administration block, and you can see it circled there below grades. It's a link. You just click on participation map. It used to be bushcrafter. And then it brings up this interface here. It has extensive settings as far as how you want it to appear, whether you want to see curved, Bezier curves is what we ended up with, or straight line arrows between the posts, or use the first names or the last names. You can choose to plot it. The plot link creates the normal one for in-class use because it shows the pictures of the students. It shows their first names or last names. And then there's a list of a column of anonymous links there for reporting results outside. I realize we're running out of time. I'll wrap up. So currently, I'm setting up a website to make these open source projects available, brant.knutzen.se. It's a Swedish server. And the goal is to release these both at Moodle Move to Australia in July. Now, the bushcrafter has been finished and working, and it's just been released by Lingnan as open source, so I'm picking it up, and I've already done the new enhancement for the anonymous mode, and I'll release that again as the participation map. And then the new participation forum, I hope to have that ready for release in July as well. So there's my email address, brant@gmail.com. And if you'd like to raise some questions, I'd love to hear them.
Okay, Brant, I just want to first of all say thank you very much for your time. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I think you've seen from the number of questions and comments that people have put in the active discussion there that there's been very lively interest in this topic, and certainly it's been great to hear from someone who's put a lot of thought into this, given us some very nice practical examples, but also underpinned all of that by good pedagogy. So I think it's been absolutely fascinating, and I think everyone else has found it as well. So what I'll do now is give people a chance to be able to ask some questions. You've been very good by typing in all your comments, but some of you might actually like to take the microphone. So what I'll do, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please just click the little hand that's there so we know the order that people would like to ask questions. Otherwise, you can type in. I know some people may not have a mic, so just type a question if you want. But if you would like to take the mic, please just put your hand up, so we'll give you a chance to be able to speak as well as type. And then we might be able to tell some of the accents.
Have I considered using letting activity groups USRE? Any experience using this in fully online courses? When I teach my master's courses, I do them fully online, completely distance mode for 1 or 2 sessions to let the students experience that. And I use the participation map to give them feedback as to how the discussions are going. Also, because it is quantitatively marked, the students know they can earn the points. It's very effective to keep that going. The only difference is when it's fully distance mode, I use Moodle chats instead of the oral time. So for 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, they'll go into a Moodle chat, and then they'll come back and post on the discussion forums. All right, JP, catch you another time. Kim. What might be the correlation between successful negotiation of meaning and level of productivity, transactivity, etc.? Well, it's a good question. I have found that when students get highly engaged and there's lots of activity, I think they tend to get more deeply involved and produce deeper levels of understanding. The discussion sometimes forks off in digression and goes off on different paths. I rarely delete those. I rarely try to stop that. I'm happy to see the students finding engagement productive in almost any direction. It's usually around the topics, and particularly in Asia, the students are quite, as I said, instrumental. They want to get a good grade. They're highly motivated to that, and they are very focused. USQ, so you won't be around, but I'll look for, was it Michael Sankey? Matthew, can we use virtual classroom too? Is that for distance learning, or are you talking about like Second Life, kind of virtual classroom? I have taught using Second Life. I have a little classroom that I built in Second Life, and I have my PowerPoints, and the students all appear in their avatars and sit down, and the same interaction. I talk, and they chat back. Chat is actually very useful, even when we're face-to-face, particularly if you have a mixed culture where, say, you have Westerners who tend to talk easily and a lot, and they often dominate the oral talking time. And if the students are all sitting in front of laptops and there's a chat open, they can type in chat and have their voice be heard and appear in front of everybody on their laptops, even while that Westerner is talking so much. And I've also used chats when I'm lecturing to put up a chat window next to my PowerPoints. And so when I ask a question, what do you guys think? It's very difficult to get an oral response, particularly in Hong Kong, but I can get 60 or 70% of the students responding via a chat and just look at the chat responses and react to those. So there are definitely some components of of distance education, which can be very useful even in the classroom, the face-to-face classroom. Archives can be analyzed with no automated discourse analysis. There is some automated discourse analysis tools out there. I've never used them. I know they've been around actually for like 10 years or so, where they can look at the quality of an essay and suggest a rating. But I personally, I don't rate a lot of essays, grade a lot of essays. I look at research papers mostly. But in the discussions themselves, I'm looking for quality of thought, where the students are building on each other, bringing in useful examples from their own past, from their own experiences, looking up new links, and I give them a forum where they can also put the links to other papers in a student-suggested reading forum. I agree that quality is essential, and my point is that the teacher's role is to maintain quality in the discussion. It's the LMS's role to eliminate the need for quantification of tiny marks being distributed all the time. I'm trying to achieve a risk-free environment where the students are free to talk about whatever they like. And I try to keep it conversational. If the students know the teacher's going to subjectively assess, they tend to put up a giant first post trying to earn an A, and that doesn't lend itself well to conversational discourse.
Are there any other particular questions that people would like to ask Brant, or any other information you'd like, in particular about the participation map that's being shown tonight, or today, wherever you are in the world?
I do. I love to bring in external students. I think that's one of the beauties of an online discussion. I did have a collaborative project between my Hong Kong students at Lingnan in Second Life and with students from the University of Texas A&M. My students were studying English. Their students were studying teaching English as a second language. And they interacted in Second Life, and then they followed it up with Moodle discussion forums. Just to throw it out there to the Australians and New Zealanders out there, the time difference between Hong Kong and one second, Charlie. The time difference between I can't stop right now. Sorry, Charlie wants to talk to Daddy, so I got to go. Where was I going to say there? Yeah, lost the trail of thought completely. Anybody can remind me? The time difference.
The time difference between Hong Kong.
Thank you. The time difference between Hong Kong and the University of Texas is 12 or 13 hours. So I had to teach from 7 to 9 p.m. in Hong Kong, and the Texas students had to get up and go to school by 6 a.m. in order to achieve this collaborative project. So I would love to have a project between Hong Kong and Australia or New Zealand where the time difference is 3 hours or nothing for Perth, I believe. So even New Zealand, I think, is only, 5 hours, or it's definitely much less than the U.S. So anybody out there that's interested in a collaborative project, I would love to have one. The time difference is much more manageable.
Okay, so there's an offer for everyone there, and certainly I'm sure Brant would love to hear from everyone to be involved in a joint activity. And Brant, I'm just thinking you're great to do this, and I can see that your family would like you back. So are there any other comments that people want to make, or any other questions they want to ask, so we can give Brant some time back with his family?
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'd love to develop a project with maybe a TESOL group teaching English as a second language. Hey, Mike, you're welcome. Thanks, Bill. Sorry about that. He's 3. He wants to go outside and play. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here.
Okay,
learning skills scenario.
Okay, sorry. Do you want to just take that one as the last one?
I wasn't sure what he meant by a learning skills scenario. Perhaps you could elaborate on that. And certainly, developing writing.
Would you like to take the microphone?
Yeah, I seem to have a bit of lag here, though. Don't know why. So, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Well, we could hear you, but now you don't appear to have the mic down.
Okay.
You just click the talk button and then just leave it on.
All right, sorry about that. I've been used to Wimber, so I was just sort of holding it down continually. All right. Yeah, I found the international students were actually postgrads, not undergrads, and what they were doing was coming in for the English experience. So I wanted to hear Australian students talking in a non-assessed scenario. And also build social networks, and it was absolutely brilliant having those more experienced students with undergraduates and really successful collaboration. So I'd be really interested in doing that as a trial, perhaps in an English language development scenario.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, was English language development, and I agree. It's an incredible development. The students tend to start with chat, just using typed chat, and then when they get a little more comfortable in Second Life, they can go to the voice mode, and that's really the goal. So I set up a environment where the students could sit down in booths in a 50-style restaurant and chat with each other, and when they were ready to take it to the voice level, I created these booths that were like a Cadillac car with the front seat turned around, and it was each car is in its own little parcel, so it's an acoustically isolated region. So it eliminates the music from the restaurant so that you can talk more clearly, and also the people that are at the car next to you cannot hear this, so it eliminates the interference between the voice conversations. So I did that at Ringnan, and it ran for a 2-year project, but it's about to go away. But I'd be glad to give you a tour of that Second Life region. I think April, this month, is its last month of life.
Okay, Brant, what we might do is finish up, if that's okay. So we'll give you a chance. You've been very generous with your time. We'll give you a chance to spend some time with your family, and I'm sure Charlie's not going to wait all night to be able to go and play. So, Brant, just wanted to say thank you very much for your time. It's been great. This has been a really good session. There's been a lot of lively discussion, some very good examples you've given us, and some follow-ups that'll take place. So this is exactly what the webinar series is designed for. So really pleased to see that come off so well tonight. Thank you everyone for participating. So just keep your eye out for the next one in the series. We've got a whole program up for 2012. So just go back to transformingassessment.com and you'll be able to see the program for the rest of the year. So Brant, thanks very much, and have a good rest of the day. And Matthew, we could probably stop the archiving now.